Hello, everyone. I am Dylan Holsey. I'm a nurse practitioner student here at JSU, and this is my Xtreme Makeover project. This is part of our NU 713 class for Organizational and Systems Leadership for the Advanced Practice Nurse, and this is March 2025. Just to start, I'm going to go over some goals that I have for this presentation. First, I want to highlight the importance of communication in the hospital setting. I also want to demonstrate how negative communication or lack thereof can impact care of a patient and even discourage staff. Next, I want to relate the presentation to a present day issue, which I will highlight that later on, and change the narrative using innovation and communication to rewrite my story. And the PowerPoint will kind of follow this sort of order. So first I'm going to recount my story with a summary of necessary details, and I will describe the miscommunication that was made and certain factors or variables that will influence that. Then we're going to reflect and change upon the story that I told, and we can assess my organization's culture through how it enforces its core values. And we will think of hindrances that can be removed or improved upon. And lastly, I will rewrite the story using those methods of reflection and change. And I will show what the organization could be if it followed necessary steps. So here is my story. Essentially, another nurse was caring for a patient on our oncology ICU unit. And the way it's set up is there's two different hallways, and I was sitting on the same hallway as this nurse. The night was going normally. I had 3 patients. They all were doing really well. Well, all of a sudden, we have monitors on all our patients. So we saw the hypoxia alarm was going off and was dipping down pretty low, below 30% almost. So we all ran in there, all people from our side, and prepared in case of emergency situation, the COVID situation. Um, the patient's family member who was sleeping before woke up and started being verbally abusive to the staff and pulled out his cell phone trying to record and was actually threatening team members that were trying to care for the spouse. Um, then that commotion altogether just negatively impacted how we reacted to caring for that patient, as we didn't really have a plan set into place for this sort of scenario. So all of us were panicking and who was going to call security to help because this guy was getting in the way and that sort of thing. So it was chaotic. And the hospital policy itself prevents that sort of behavior, recording and getting in the way of emergency situation. The person needs to be removed so that we can provide proper care. So the police was called to escort them minutes or probably like half an hour later. And due to the nature of the situation, the staff didn't feel safe with that spouse being in the room with them. So we talked and sent our concerns to the hospital administration. And at first, they seemed to agree and had the patient spouse required to have a security personnel present at all times. And they were only allowed certain time periods to visit. But the patient spouse complained to the administration again and was eventually able to come back with no security. And the nurses caring for this patient were honestly scared for their licenses, scared that they were going to be yelled at or abused, or the person could get it away, which is a big liability in a way. So we actually had a few nurses want to call out the next day and that sort of thing. And the next time that we cared for this patient, we had 2 nurses going at the same time. So we kind of limited our staff in that way. And we're already understaffed at that point. So this just creates more and more issues. And we really would like the administration to handle things and listen to our concerns, which there seemed to be a major lack of communication in that regard about our safety. And so, like I said before, the lack of communication was multifactorial. It was a very stressful situation with a code situation. We also had more than one code that night, so the acuity level of the whole unit was high. So we all were on edge, and we were fearful of what this person was going to do during the situation. You never know what's going to happen. And we did not have any kind of training of what would happen during this situation because this person's getting in the way during a code. And if we're short staffed already, we don't have enough personnel to kind of get this person out of the way. And like I said, also there just seems to be a disconnect between the hospital administration in regards to ensuring our safety and making sure we have the staff to handle this situation to begin with. And this is a scary fact that we have, especially nowadays. We hear all the stories about workplace violence. And from 2005 to 2014, the percentage of abuse of staff increased by 110%, and they're still rising. So there's not much being implemented by the hospital staff in terms of solutions. And here's my reference here for that. Now I want to highlight themes in conversation versus how that is portrayed in the culture of the workplace. So common themes that we talk about amongst each other as we're short-staffed, we're overworked, we're not valued. And in this situation, we're scared for our safety, and our input actually does not matter. We tell the hospital that we are concerned, but they do not value our concerns. And many people feel like they're underpaid due to cuts in overtime pay or even pay in general, post-COVID, of course. And this culture that is portrayed through these factors is that we are underappreciated, and there's not really much desire for the staff to want to stay in the situation. Our communication doesn't matter, and as a result, we don't want to stay there, and there's no safety guarantees for us. Many staff members are calling out or thinking of working elsewhere. And it seems like, as a whole, healthcare has accepted abuse as part of the job, which should not be true. Now I want to highlight patterns of meaning versus patterns of relating. So patterns of meaning would kind of highlight the organization's core values, whereas the one that I pulled from my organization are the care values: collaboration, act with integrity, respect all, and excel. And I just want to go through all of these and examine if they're actually enforced. So collaboration, there is great interprofessional collaboration within an organization, but administration often lacks in connecting to employees. In terms of integrity, it seems the organization wants to just make money and not always do the right thing for staff. And in regards to respect, we are required to give respect but not receive it in return. So that creates this disconnect between administration and staff. And while there is room to excel this organization, it could be much better if more was invested into employees and opportunities were made to actually excel. And this relating creates a culture of almost like a dictatorship. We have to listen to what they say, where we have little to no input in what we actually want, and that we are expendable. We're just another dollar essentially to the corporation, and that we are replaceable. And like I said before, there's no reciprocation to our respect. And lastly, there is no room or opportunities to grow or excel because there's no investment into the staff. And this is how I would change things here, so we can make sure that care actually means care. We would improve collaboration and actually accept communication and input from staff. We would act with integrity, do what is right, and support staff in their decisions. And we would kind of not necessarily enforce respect, but encourage it and reward respect for everyone. All these other factors would combine together to create an excelling atmosphere for staff. And this would change the culture into a more democratic setting where, like we mentioned before, shared governance can be allowed, justice can be allowed, which allows staff to do what is right and not always the most profitable option. In addition, respect is reciprocated, and there is opportunity to grow, excel, and advance your career. The best way for the hospital to create meaning would be to listen to their staff and encourage appropriate communication. If we listen to what each employee member wants, we can see the popular idea and what would make the most sense as an organization as a whole, not just what the administration wants. In communication, even if we can't provide the best solution, we could explain why to the employees so they're more understanding rather than keep them in the dark. And all of this enhancement in communication allows innovation and staff to work together to create the best solutions. And these are the changes that I would make to my scenario specifically. I would enhance our staff intercommunication and create a system where we were trained to deal with this sort of situation. Next, I would allow the organization to provide assistance, where that could be increased security on our units to prevent these abuse scenarios. And lastly, the organization should listen to staff concerns. If tons of staff members are emailing the organization saying that we do not feel safe, they should take that and listen and value those opinions. Here's my step-by-step of how changing the narrative would impact the organization. If we create a pattern of meaning through enforcing that care, mission, values, the employees would actually see that through the investment that the corporation makes. So if we actually see that they have meaning, these care values, we will actually believe it. So the employees will take notice, and the overall culture among the workplace, these conversations that are so negative would become positive. And we could also create more innovation by gathering input from staff and using that to create new core values. And we can essentially repeat this process over and over again to perfect our core values. Here's another fact here, or from a study. Increased investment in staff and communication will result in increased performance and reduced turnover. So this could, in a way, solve our short staff problem in the hospital by investing in employees and making them want to stay. And here's my story retold. So another nurse was caring for a patient on our oncology ICU unit. I was sitting in the same section as said nurse. All was going normally until a few hours into the night when the emergency hypoxia alarm started dinging. A few other nurses and I went to check on the patient, but the oxygen levels continued to drop to critical levels. The team prepared for a possible code blue situation, but amongst all the commotion, the patient's spouse pulled out their cell phone to record and threaten team members caring for the patient. The staff quickly formed their respective roles, some caring for the patient, others speaking with the spouse. Hospital policy prevents this sort of behavior from occurring, especially in emergency situations, so the spouse was asked to exit the room while we provided care. The spouse refused, and police was then called to escort them from the premises. Due to the nature of the situation, threats, etc., the spouse was to be barred from entering the unit without security being present. This put the nurses at ease as the hospital administration listened to and valued their safety concerns. Due to the high acuity level of the unit on top of difficulties experienced with the belligerent spouse, the hospital sent more staff to put employees at ease. The hospital also offered resources for those who had been infected mentally by the situation. The patient's spouse kept the same behavior, and thus administration inquired with the unit that would be best for the situation. After a group agreement followed by a shared governance committee, the staff decided to still allow the spouse to stay, but only under a certain visitation period with the security staff escorting them. Overall, the administration's decision made staff feel valued, and staffing levels grew as a result of word of mouth from the employees. To conclude, although we cannot change the negatives of healthcare, the organization can practice effective communication, listening, and innovation to uphold the core values they have set in stone and create a culture that is positive, and the staff will feel safe and valued, which in return could fix other issues in the workplace culture, just short staffing or negative opinions. And that is it, my presentation. Here are my references that I've used, and hope you all have a good day.